Formula One, the sport where 19 of the world's best drivers and Nikita Mazepin drive cars around and 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 around.
2,000 years later.
Around and 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 around in circles. Except no. As much as people might think that's what Formula One is about, the reality is that this year we've got 23 different state-of-the-art racing facilities. I can't do it. I just can't. Aside from that, we have multiple different types of circuits. We've got historic racing venues like Silverstone, Spa, Monza, and Interlagos, where F1 history is made, newer tracks to get to countries the sport hasn't been to before the turn of the millennium, like China, Portimao, Circuit of the Americas, and other circuits which are butchered by Herman Tilke, and even street circuits like Baku, Monaco, and Singapore, which is the place you want to go if you want pure chaos. And if you were wondering, here's the full 23 race calendar for this season. But let's just quickly explain what the track is before we move on. So a Formula One track is typically defined by the white lines on the side of the track, and as long as a car has one wheel in between the two white lines, that car is on track. However, the FIA, the sport's governing body, can change this definition to the red and white curbs or just wherever for certain parts of the track, such as Turn 4 at Bahrain, where the race stewards, who are FIA representatives, decided to just let the drivers use any area they wanted to get through that turn quickly for some reason. But you're not here to learn about the tracks F1 races at, you're here to learn about what happens on those tracks. Hey guys, it's HF2 here, and in today's video, we're gonna go through the full guide to F1 in 2021. Enjoy! So the F1 race weekend is divided into 5 parts, kinda. On most weekends, Friday holds 2 practice sessions where Nikita Mazepin can spin and the drivers can get used to the circuit, though often in practice their lap times aren't representative of their true pace. So then Saturday holds a final practice session where Nikita Mazepin can continue to spin before the qualifying session where the starting grid for the race is decided. Qualifying is divided into 3 parts, where in Q1 the slowest 5 drivers are eliminated, Q2 the slowest 10 drivers are eliminated, and should you advance into the top 10 shootout, or Q3, you have to start the race on the tire compound you set your quickest Q2 lap time on, which often gives the bottom 10 the advantage of having less worn tires at the start, and on a track where 2 pit stops are made, the bottom runners, while the potential advantage if they start on harder tire compounds, may be achieving a one-stop strategy. Q3 is the ultimate shootout for pole position, where the fastest cars and drivers set the fastest lap times around a circuit, except in Portimao. Except, that's the only format for 20 of the 23 races planned this season. The other 3 weekends will have qualifying on Friday, but that qualifying session doesn't actually set the order for the race, it sets the order for qualifying. Well, how does this make any sense? So F1 have basically, for these 3 races, said that the slot that usually goes to qualifying, most of the time a Saturday afternoon, will now be a sprint race that will set the order for the race proper, with the winner starting on pole position for the Rio Grand Prix. Oh, and the top 3 get 3, 2, and 1 points respectively for the sprint qualifying race thing. I also feel I should point out that the one who starts on pole position starts at the front, with every other car lining up behind, as if that wasn't obvious. Sunday plays host to everyone's favorite part of the race weekend, the race itself. The race is a 305-kilometer long affair, unless you're in Monaco, where it's shorter for some reason, coming in at 260 kilometers. The races also require 1 mandatory pit stop where the driver cannot refuel, meaning the drivers must have enough fuel to complete the race, and where the driver must use at least 2 different tire compounds, and that brings us on 2 tire compounds. The tire compounds that F1's tire supplier Pirelli use are not very durable, but some are more durable than others, with 5 compounds to choose from. The C5 being the fastest and shortest lasting, or softest compound, and the C1 being the slowest and longest lasting, or hardest compound. The C4, C3, and C2 compounds fall in between, as I'm sure you can imagine. F1 tires also have an extremely specific window of temperature that allows drivers to extract the most pace from their car, and if their tires are not in that window, you're going to see a very unhappy team radio message. And if you're wondering what team radio is the way drivers communicate to the team that tells them what to do and how to drive the car best. Team radio also notifies the drivers of safety information, penalties, and any flags. Now, you might be wondering, why are there flags on a Formula 1 track? And to that I would answer, flags are a way of communicating with drivers and each one has a different meaning. The yellow flag means that there's been an incident on the track and the driver should slow down. The green flag means the track is clear and it's safe to get back up to racing speed. The blue flag that Nikita Mazepin seems to think doesn't exist means that a car behind you is faster than you and is about to lap you, meaning you need to move out of the way. The red flag means everyone has to return to the pits because the race has been stopped, either because someone's had a very big boo-boo, or the racetrack has spontaneously decided to become a lake due to extreme weather conditions, the most recent example of that being the 2016 Brazilian Grand Prix. But although these flags are the most common, they aren't the only flags that can be shown. The black flag, together with the driver's car number, indicates that the driver has been disqualified from the race and must return to the pits. The most recent example being Felipe Massa and Giancarlo Fisichella at the 2007 Canadian Grand Prix. But hands down, the most famous example of a black flag was Michael Schumacher at the 1994 British Grand Prix, and Schumacher choosing to ignore this black flag meant he was forced to sit out 2 races, and that 2-race ban arguably gave us one of the greatest ever F1 title deciders. But we're getting off track here. The black flag with an orange circle in the center, or the black and orange flag, as if that wasn't obvious already, is a rarely shown flag that is shown again with the driver's car number to tell a driver to return to the pits with caution because they have a, quote, obvious mechanical problem. So we've got 2 different black flags. Well, get ready for number 3. Say hello to the warning flag, the black and white flag. This flag tells a driver that they're being very, very naughty and have done something, most of the time cutting corners, to warrant the showing of said flag. If a driver does the offense the flag is shown for after the flag is shown, they're going to start receiving penalties, which we'll get onto momentarily. But we still got 3 flags yet to go. The next flag is the white flag, which indicates a slow-moving vehicle is on the circuit. This flag is often shown when drivers are performing practice starts or when there is a car recovery vehicle on the track. The next flag we're going to be looking at is the red and yellow striped flag, and this one indicates that the track is going to be very slippery up ahead, and most of the time that's due to oil or water on the track, and I must note that these flags are not just shown every time it rains. Our last flag is the one everyone wants to see, the checkered flag. Now this has 2 meanings. The one you're probably familiar with being the use in the end of the race after the last lap is being completed. This, of course, telling the drivers the race is over and they should return to Parc Fermé. Again, we'll touch on that later. However, when the checkered flag is shown in practice and qualifying, it has a different meaning. Now, because practice and qualifying are both set on the principle of fastest pace over a single lap, the checkered flag in these sessions tells drivers if you're on a lap at the time the checkered flag is shown, you can complete it and then go on a lap to return to the pits. Essentially, if you pass the checkered flag, your session is over. It's also important to note that all flags except the checkered flag are shown at marshal posts and on LED light panels situated throughout the circuit. The checkered flag being the exception, that flag will only be shown at the finish line. And since I can't come up with a segue to our next segment, here's another title card. Penalties in F1 can be given to any driver for any reason, but different offenses coincide with different penalties. So let's go through each of the different types of penalties a driver can receive. So starting with the most mild, we have a 5 or 10 second penalty, which is just 5 or 10 seconds added to the driver's race time at the finish. It's almost nothing, as we'll shortly see, but the next penalty up is the drive-through penalty, often used for jump starts. This penalty is rather self-explanatory. If you get it, you drive your car through the pits. Like, that's it. You don't stop, you don't get new tires, and you have to serve it within 2 laps of receiving it. Up one more notch on the metaphorical penalty severity meter is the stop and go penalty, which is similar in basically every regard to the drive-through in that you go through the pits, your mechanics aren't allowed to work on your car, and you must serve it within 2 laps of receiving it. The only difference being that you have to stop in your pit box for 5 or 10 seconds depending on how severe the penalty given was. But let's say you have an undying urge to not abide by the Formula 1 regulations, but are also in a championship fight where a penalty could lose you the title. So you come to your friendly neighborhood HF2 and ask, if I take out my championship rival with 1 race to go, like the historic Senna Prost shenanigans, they can't give me a penalty because I'm out of the race, right? And to that I say no, they'll probably just give you a grid penalty for the next race. So grid penalties are quite simple. If you qualify first with a 5-place grid penalty, you'll start the race you've acquired the penalty in for 6th place. It just knocks you down the specified number of slots. I think we're done here. So the next penalty is the most severe that can be given in a race, aside from the next one, and is the 30-second time penalty, which is just 30 seconds added to the driver's race time. That's it. I know you were expecting something more dramatic, but that's it. But what comes next is coincidentally the black flag, which is the harshest race penalty you can be given, and as we've discussed, is literally just disqualifying a driver in case you don't remember the first 3 minutes and 14 seconds of the video. The last penalty is actually the harshest that can be given, which is a 1 or 2 race ban, and that only comes if you do a Romain Grosjean, or you rack up enough penalty points for the FIA to not like you anymore. Penalty points, I hear you ask? What are penalty points? Well, hypothetical viewer, that's what we're going to go into next. Essentially, each penalty has an attached number of penalty points, and those penalty points are attached to one super license, which was actually not named by a 2-year-old, and is just the license given to drivers to let them compete in Formula 1. But back to penalty points. If you get 12 penalty points in a given 12-month period, you will be given a race ban, after which your penalty points will be wiped and you will be able to start again. But of course, all that essentially explains the rules of the 2021 Formula 1 season, so let's now jump into our guide. So F1 in 2021 has 10 teams, each of which is able to develop their car to try and make it the fastest in the sport. And these consist, in descending championship order as of the Monaco Grand Prix, of Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas. Each team is also able to pick between now 4 power units, but this can change as manufacturers withdraw from and enter the sport. The 4 current manufacturers are Mercedes, who supply their own team, Racing Point, McLaren, and Williams, Renault, who supply Alpine, Ferrari, who again supply their own team, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and finally, Honda, who will withdraw from the end of 2021, only for their power units to be rebranded as Red Bull power units. Can you see where this is going? Guess who Honda supply? I dare you. Well, if you didn't guess, Honda's engines are currently in the back of Red Bull and AlphaTauri machinery, and the rebranded engines will remain in the back of the 2 Red Bull teams. Now, I feel this would be a good time to explain the stuff I forgot to earlier, being the championship, the point system, and Parc Ferme. Now, Parc Ferme is quite simple. Basically, it means after qualifying, you can't make setup changes to your car unless you start in the pit lane. That's it. So, on to the championship. So F1 has 2 championships, the Drivers' Championship, where all 20 drivers compete for top honors, and the Constructors' Championship, where every driver's points while racing for a given team are counted towards the team's position. Now, each Grand Prix has the exact same point system. The winner gets 25 points, which descends all the way to 1 point for 10th, as shown on this little fancy graphic. Now that we've got that done, let's proceed, shall we? So, of course, Mercedes have won the last 6 Constructors' Championships in a row, with Valtteri Bottas and reigning world champion Lewis Hamilton as its drivers this year. But as I alluded to earlier, they've been given quite the fight by Red Bull and its drivers Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez this year, with McLaren and Ferrari both picking up podiums, with Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo driving for McLaren, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz driving for Ferrari. And if you don't know, podiums are just the top 3 finishers of a Grand Prix. So we've outlined the championship fight and the fight for the so-called best of the rest position this year, being third in the Constructors' Championship, but we've yet to outline the real midfield scrap, the scrap for 5th place, currently being fought by 3 of the 4 teams on the grid who have names starting with A. Those being Aston Martin, running Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time world champion, and Lance Stroll. AlphaTauri, which is really just Red Bull's team, where they put their less experienced drivers like Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly. But the final team in the fight for 5th is Benetton, Renault, Lotus, Renault, Alpine, and they run possibly the most exciting lineup of, young talent. Including Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. Alfa Romeo Racing is just kind of in no man's land, sitting in 8th in the championship, as is Williams in 9th, and really Haas in last 2. And now I realize I haven't been able to weasel their drivers into this segment yet. So Alfa Romeo run Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi, Williams run Nicholas Latifi and George Russell, and Haas run Mick Schumacher and the king of Instagram videos, Nikita Mazepin. If you know, you know. But that's the current running order in the Constructors' Championship, but what about the Drivers' Championship? Well, of course I mentioned that Lewis Hamilton was the reigning 7-time world champion, and that the rising star of motorsport, Max Verstappen, is looking to dethrone him this season. But what I didn't mention was the role of the other drivers at Mercedes and Red Bull, because they are going to need to help their teammates to win this championship, and the driver's title could well be decided by who plays the number 2 role best. Behind them, we have the McLaren team preparing to make waves in 2022, with the massive changes coming to the cars into effect next year. As of now, McLaren appears to be a team of 2 halves, with the well-incumbent, but overall less experienced Lando Norris significantly beating out the experienced race winner and potential future champion Daniel Ricciardo, who happens to have joined McLaren for this season. We also have Ferrari, with the experienced Carlos Sainz pretty much matching Ferrari's golden boy and well-rated superstar Charles Leclerc. Following that, we have Aston Martin, where a Sebastian Vettel, who is well past his best, is thoroughly destroying Lance Stroll, who is only at the team because his dad owns the team. Following that, we have AlphaTauri with Yuki Tsunoda trying to prove himself to Red Bull, and Pierre Gasly, a Red Bull reject, I think it's safe to say actively trying to find a way out of the Red Bull family. Beyond that, we have Alpine, where a close battle between Mercedes protege Esteban Ocon and 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso rages. And then we have Alfa Romeo, where Antonio Giovinazzi is showing glimmers of pace against another world champion in Kimi Räikkönen, who is well past his best, granted, and in his 3rd decade in the sport. Beyond that, we have Williams with Daddy's Catch 2 Electric Boogaloo, otherwise known as Nicholas Latifi, who I think is actually quite underrated and did a very good job against the rising star of Formula 1, or another rising star of Formula 1, because I already called Verstappen the rising star of Formula 1. There are a lot of good drivers in Formula 1, but that driver is a Mercedes protege in George Russell. And then we have Haas. Oh no. Haas really might as well only have one driver, that being Mick Schumacher, who is a good driver in his first season in F1, but Nikita Mazepin is just slow, ignores blue flags, and doesn't actually drive quickly at all, because he's slow, is an incredibly terrible person, and just doesn't really care about anyone. And to be honest, I would much rather see that seat go to someone with real talent who isn't there because of their dad's money and is a talented driver and least of all a good person. But no, we have Nikita Mazepin, who's a slow, terrible driver and a But that's it for the teams and the drivers. You know the fights going on this season, you know the rules the cars have to abide by on track, but there's still one thing we're missing. But before I can get into that, I just want to point out one thing, and that's that it takes a lot more than one F1 driver to run an F1 team, and everyone in each of those teams are absolutely crucial to its operation, especially since this year there's a budget cap which restricts team finances, forcing bigger teams like Mercedes and Red Bull to cut their staff levels and become leaner operations dependent on fewer individuals. And I'd be mad to list off all the major staff of every F1 team here, as it would probably double the video length, but just know, you need more than drivers to run a successful F1 team. Now, the politics of F1 are infinitely complicated, but to explain it as promptly as possible, it usually goes like this. Team does something clever. Other team who didn't do same thing asks FIA if they can do same thing to see if it falls within regulations. If no, FIA issues technical directive to tell teams, no, you can't do that. If yes, team protests it anyways while developing own version, because team loses out and is petty, which is fair, I guess. And a famous example of the if-yes route was the 2009 season and the double diffuser. Now, I won't go into detail here, but if I've pressed all the right buttons, a link to a video by Cranky Yankee F1 should show up in the iCards, which explains the whole thing rather well. But if you want a more accurate recent example of this, I shall defer you to Red Bull's Flexi Wings, which are wings that move under forces to create a faster car, and Mercedes don't have said flexible wings, so they decided to protest Red Bull's wings, but are annoyed that the FIA is waiting to the French Grand Prix to introduce stricter load tests that should get rid of them, because obviously Red Bull is gaining an advantage from them again, and I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but that was the gist of it. And with that, our beginner's guide to F1 in 2021 is complete. So, I hope you all enjoyed my video on the basics of Formula 1. This has been HF2, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.